Perfect.
Great. Are we live? I'm just gonna wait. Let me just double check that this is on the Facebook page.
Oh, we are on.
You seem, yeah.
Right, we're on? Okay, great.
So we're just gonna
Double
wait for a few
checking.
minutes for people to
Yes.
join. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, look, Jared, boy. Hi, Jared.
Hey, Jared.
Where you seeing people?
The comment section. All right, should I start? We have 10 people on. Everybody's okay
What
to
time is
start?
it? Yeah, fine.
Give
Let's
me a
see how
thumbs
we
up.
are.
Maybe you should
Yeah?
just give a couple of, probably one more minute.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure, no problem.
Give it a chance
I'll
for
wait.
everyone to join.
No problem.
So I see 11 persons.
Shall we begin?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Sounds good.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first live session on home ownership. I'm Denise, Knowledge Officer at Terra Caribbean Trinidad. Now, just a little bit about Terra Caribbean Trinidad before we begin. We've been around since about 1999 doing brokerage, valuations, and consultancy, and we're part of the wider Terra Caribbean franchise, which is headed in Barbados. The group has offices in Grenada and St. Lucia as well. Locally, we have a team of 18 agents and a valuations department of 5 valuers/valuation technicians. And together, our mission is to ensure you feel comfortable and confident to make informed decisions. So right before we get into it, I'd like to introduce each of our presenters. They're all agents. Firstly, we have Darius Passad, who came to Terra Caribbean with 20 years prior experience in the financial services sector. He's held roles in retail and commercial banking, credit risk, mortgages, and collections regionally. Therefore, Darius is more than capable to present on the pre-qualification process and why this is important. Next, we have Sasha Anton, who also worked in banking for a number of years before getting immersed into the property business. Sasha has helped many families find their dream homes in a wide range of prices. She also served as a member on the board at AREA, which is the Association of Real Estate Agents, and she'll be presenting on other cash needed outside the down payment and, of course, stamp duty. After that, we have Josette Dick. She's worked in various sectors such as international development, education, financial services, and management consulting in different countries. Josette brings us a wide breadth of professional experience to real estate, and she'll be presenting on things to be aware of in your property search. Then we have Andrea Barry, a dynamic agent with over 20 years of management experience, having worked in London, Fort Lauderdale, and Port of Spain before jumping into real estate. Over the years, she's built an appreciation for customer service and sales and brings this personal touch to her real estate transactions. She's more than qualified to talk about closing properties during a pandemic, as she's closed many properties from the last lockdown to now. Last but not least, before we have our Q&A session, we have Christian Demiak, who has returned to the Terra team after 10 years of working in real estate in prime central London for Harrods Estate and Knight Frank. Altogether, Christian has 16 years experience in real estate, and having been exposed to international market, we draw parallels to our local market, and will be giving us an update on the residential segment of our local real estate market. So I've spoken enough. I'm going to hand you over to Darius with his bit on pre-qualification. Darius?
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you so much, Denise. Let's look at it like this. I want you to stop and I want you to think a little bit with me. Maybe you close your eyes and think about this section. Let's start with your dream. Think about it. What does your dream home look like? What does it look like to you? What does it look like to your family? And what does it look like now? What does that look like in 10, 15 years' time? Is it going to be a forever home? How many bedrooms does it have? How many bathrooms? Do you think you might be having children? Do you need extra space? Are you getting married? You know, think about things like this. Then think about proximity to where you work. How much time you're going to spend in transit? Proximity to schools if you intend on having kids. And also think about amenities. Think about supermarkets. Think about how close is your pharmacy, and maybe even leisure activities like if you golf, things like that. So now that you have that locked in, let me give you another second. Do you have it locked in? All right, so you have it locked in now. Now I want you to think about, can you afford it? Is the answer yes? Is it no? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, great. So here's where pre-qualification comes in. Do you need to borrow money to make this dream a reality? And it can happen. And this is where pre-qualification is important. So what it does is that you're trying to match what you can afford in relation to your dream. So what is a bank going to need? What a lender is going to need? And I would encourage you to go to as many of them as possible so that you can have a rational decision. Even have them battle against one another to win your business, because you have the power in the transaction at this point. Most lenders are going to require you to have a 10% deposit to lend you on a mortgage instrument against the property of your dreams. So some things that lenders are going to require is information with regards to your income and how much you can afford. Most lenders will look at 40% debt service ratio. I don't want to get too technical with you, but there's a level of affordability inside there in regard to your debt. Now, in regard to your debt, you will have to know, do I have credit cards? Do I have loans? What's the balances? What's the amount I pay every month? That's going to be important for your banker. And what's also important is when are you going to retire? And how long will you have really to pay for your house? So these are some of the things that you need to consider. My piece is really short. I just want to say thank you, and I want to hand you over to my colleague.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Darius. If there are any questions, please just type them in the comment section. And we're going to roll right into Sasha, who will be talking about cash needed outside of the 10% down payment. Sasha?
Hi, Denise. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So further to what Darius was just talking about with the 10% down payment, trying to buy a home or looking to buy a home, there's a lot more ad hoc expenses that you may not think about, and I'm going to just kind of run them through with you. All right. So in January, down payment is the biggest cash that you're going to need, right? And that is generally 10% of the agreed sale price. This is held in escrow either at your lawyer, with your lawyer, or at the brokerage. Okay, and a payment for that is expected upon signing the sale agreement. The other thing after that, which we have talked about before, is the stamp duty. All right, now as of January 1st, 2021, this year, for new homeowners, first-time homeowners, there's a tax exemption of up to $2 million, right? Now, if you're not sure what stamp duty is, it is a mandatory tax that you pay the government, right? And this is for the transfer of ownership on the property. Now, as I said, for the first-time homeowners, it's up to $2 million, and this is property. It has to be house and land, townhouse, apartment. It cannot be just land alone, right? However, if you do already own land and you want to take out a mortgage to build, you are also exempt up to the $2 million. Okay. For persons who have owned property before, you still have an exemption up to $850,000. And then, of course, you may come across properties that are, and you hear it, is being sold in a company name. All right. So I don't want to say that, yes, it saves you 100%, you're not paying any stamp duty. There is a small fee that you do pay. And to work that out, it's 0.5% of the share value or the value of the property, whichever is higher. All right. So as I said, it's 0.5% or $5 per $1,000. Okay. The next thing that we'll cover is attorney fees. Now, this varies depending on a law firm that you go with. As someone who's looking to purchase a home, it is your responsibility to find a lawyer best suited for you, who will work with you, who will see about everything from the sale agreement to conveyancing of the transaction. All right. Now, I can't go into too much details of what the lawyer's fees are, but they are guided by the rules of the Legal Protection Act. Okay. Beyond that, we have the valuation report. Now, this is to get a market opinion of how much a house is going to cost. That is about 0.25% of the value price. Okay. Now, how Terra does valuations, and I think most valuers, everybody has their own charge, but we do it for $2,000 plus VAT. All right. Now, if your residential property happens to come under $800,000, then it's just a flat fee that you pay. All right. But we'd be happy to discuss that with you if it's something that you're interested in doing with Terra. Other things that we have is bank charges. Now, bank charges generally cover your management fees and your commitment fees, however your bank calls it. This goes between 1% and 1.5% of your mortgage amount. Then we have house insurance and life insurance. House insurance is needed in order to close the transaction. And then life insurance, sometimes your banker may ask you to take out extra life insurance, and that will serve as collateral in case if anything happened. After that, now, if it is that many people are looking for fixer-uppers, or maybe you want to change the color of the house, you want to buy some new furniture, these are extra expenses that you're going to have to put out of your pocket. Based on your criteria, the bank would be, for a fixer-upper, they would be willing to do a loan separate to your mortgage, but most times these are out-of-pocket expenses that you're going to have to pay on your own. Okay, so any of these things I'll be very happy to discuss with you in further detail. Feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Please.
Thank you so much, Sasha. It was very informative, very detailed. And like Sasha said, you could reach out to her or to any one of our agents with any kind of guidance on stamp duty, on cash needed outside of down payment. Now we'll just roll right into Josette. She'll be presenting on things to look out for in your property search. Josette.
Hi, thanks Denise, and welcome everybody. So happy to have you all join us. So basically this would be like a 2-in-1 special, my segment here. I want to stress the importance of using a real estate agent in your search for property, whether it's residential or commercial, as well as things that you have to look out for. The reality is that there is some fraud in the market. So that is why you want to, from the time you start searching for property, engage a real estate agent. Just as Sasha and Darius have shown, they have a wealth of information. We do this every day. Most people buying a home or a property, you may do it once in your life, twice if you're, so fortunate to do so. So let us do the heavy lifting so that you can acquire your property in as painless and comfortable a process as possible. So from the beginning of the search process, and I have my notes in case I look down, I don't want to forget anything. But from the beginning of the sale process, what we do is that we check in with the vendor, the person selling the property, just to make sure that all the necessary documents are in place. Our main goal is to ensure that as much as the process is comfortable for buyer and seller, we want to also ensure that we protect your down payment or deposit. Sasha and Darius spoke about the 10% deposit or down payment. You can use that interchangeably. So in our industry, we trust but verify. If a vendor says that there are approvals like residential, commercial, mixed use approvals, we as the agent would ensure that those documents are there. We actually request those. But if you're not familiar with the process, you may just go ahead and put down your down payment without ensuring that there are proper documents in place and that your property can be fully financed by your financial institution. So some documents that we would ask for, the deed, we would ensure that the person selling the property has the right to sell the property. So some ID information works as well, land and building taxes receipt, the WASA clearance certificate, lease rent receipt. So several other documents depending on the type of property that you're buying. What else? So in terms of fraud, sometimes there are people pretending to sell property, having the right to do so, and they do not. So as real estate agents, we have training in terms of what to look for. So of course, we're not God, we can't see everything, but basically the documents that we would ask for, they are documents that we would require the vendor and the seller to fill out so that we have information on both parties. We're very much concerned that we know source of funds basically, and that protects you. Some people think, oh, you know, we're asking so many questions, but this is just to protect you. We don't want you to lose your deposit. We don't want your funds tied up in a transaction that really cannot be fulfilled. So when it comes to the sale agreement, and Darius spoke about being pre-qualified, so you want to make sure you do that before you sign a sale agreement. As your real estate agent, we can actually offer you a draft agreement. We tell you to work with an attorney to finalize that document. So the agent works with the buyer, the seller, as well as the banker and the attorney. So we're there to make sure that communication is smooth and that we can present documents to them. So when you're ready to sign your sale agreement, we can review that document, we can give you your thoughts, our thoughts on it, as well as we would ensure that your deposit is held in escrow. At least that is one of our recommendations, and that protects you as well as the other party. So that those funds are kept safely away from the buyer or the seller until the transaction closes. As your real estate agent also, we can find out from the vendor about the financing structure of the transaction. If it's a regular home that you're buying, 10% down upon signing of the sale agreement, and then the 90% when the transaction closes. However, if it's a pre-sale, that means that the property hasn't been built as yet, you're probably buying into a development, there could be a different financing timeline. So again, before you sign your sale agreement, we as the agent will ensure that we have that information to provide to you. So once you pull the trigger, you're good to go, and you can speak with your banker to ensure that your payment arrangement is in place to close the deal. So I definitely want to stress again, guys, use your agent as a resource. We are there for you from the beginning of the transaction all the way to the end of the transaction. And we're really here to make things smoother for you. So I think I basically covered everything, Denise. So guys, thanks a lot. And of course, I can talk to you all on a one-on-one basis if you have any questions about what you need to look for when buying a property. There's a lot more information I can share. I can talk about this all day, but I don't have the time. So thanks so much, Denise, and I'll pass back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Josette. And if we're rushing through things, it's just that we want to make it in between the hours. So if there are any questions afterwards, please feel free to use that comment section, type in a question, and we will address it. Okay, moving right along to Andrea Barry. She's going to be talking about closing properties, closing transactions during a pandemic, during a lockdown, which we are very much in. Over to you, Andrea.
Okay, so thanks, Denise, for the intro, and good afternoon, everyone on the panel and everybody on the Facebook Live. I'm jumping right into it, right? So we all know what COVID is, and it's been trending pretty much since December 2019, but it became that global reality in 2020, and it crippled the way we were accustomed doing business. it forced a lot of businesses to shut their doors, and it introduced that new norm of work from home and work remotely. So how are we supposed to get things done? And actually that new norm is no longer new, right? That is the norm. So what happened was essential services were exempt from a complete shutdown. And you saw things like utilities, national security, sanitation, of course, the healthcare, industry remained open, as well as many of the government offices. So we experienced a level of innovation where new safety protocols had to be put in place, rotation systems. We saw revamped internal processes, and there was a push to be more efficient and minimize the human contact. So in order to complete a sale, there are specific documents to be submitted by the vendor. You heard Josette speak a lot about what was coming from the person who is purchasing, but the vendor also has to produce these documents. And majority of them are requested from the same government offices that now have restrictions in place. So title searches at the registry office became by appointment only. The Water and Sewage Authority, WASA, they introduced a Dropbox system, and pretty much what that was, your application, all your documents went into an envelope, went into a Dropbox with your name and a contact number, and I believe an email on the front of it. They wouldn't touch that package until about 48 hours after. That was supposed to be like a sanitization, safety timeline for them. And then they would pick that up. They will confirm that they've received your application via email. They will call you and let you know, pay the application now and whatever outstanding fees were due. And similarly with your land tax receipts, that's actually was still a walk-in process. And I would assume they would social distance and only allow a certain amount to the cashier at a period in time. So in this whole process, we have people that we're dealing with, right? And for the model that I'm speaking about, I'm just going to say that there are about 5 people in a sale. So you have your buyer, your seller, your attorney, your banker, and your real estate agent, right? And Josette is right. That's, we're not tooting our own horn, but we are a very important element in the sale process. And we're human. So to some level, every person is permeated with some level of fear or anxiety due to COVID, right? And it became a really humbling attempt to overcome this. What we witnessed was a kindness first approach from everyone. And empathy and understanding was definitely the way forward to make a sale close. So expectations were adjusted and persons understood that we needed to work differently. That was across the board. We all understood this. So you saw real estate agents introducing more video content. We engage in virtual viewings. Bankers and attorneys were accepting e-signatures on purchase agreements. Attorneys were asking for a COVID clause to be inserted into a purchase agreement. And briefly and simply what a COVID clause is, it just extends your agreement for a period of time, normally between 30 and 60 days, in the event that the economy locks down, pretty much like what we're in right now. So it safeguards both buyer and seller, takes away that level of anxiety. It automatically activates once we go into a lockdown. So again, open and effective communication by all parties, a lot of honesty, listening to feedback, and finding solutions became the key element to successfully closing of a sale during COVID. What we all learned through all of this is life goes on, albeit a little differently, right? But the pandemic has affected all of us, some of us more adversely than others. But persons are still getting married, and babies are still being born, and expats are returning home, and persons are still migrating. And so the cycle of life is continuing, and shelter is a necessity of life. And so the demand is still there, maybe a little small, but the demand is still there. And as a real estate agent, we want to ensure that your sale is closed. And if I was to refer to Josette again, we are an important element. And we do this every day, and so we tend to look for certain things in a sale and raise it very early in the sale process. Closing in a lockdown, however, is a little bit more challenging, right? Because now we have curfew. Don't go out there. It's very restrictive, and there's more fear and there's more anxiety in this entire thing. So what I can say is majority of closings that have happened in the past 2 months have been due to vendors being prepared with their applications for their WASA clearance, their land tax. Once that was already in the system, you were going to get it. You know, buyers who maybe anticipated this coming move forward with their sale, you know, initiating the sale, telling, you know, we're ready to move forward and pre-qualified, let's get this deal going. And then real estate agents, you know, reviewing the process and advising their clients properly and managing expectations. And there are many expectations that come from all angles. Attorneys and financial institutions started working on rotation, and the COVID clause, of course, served many persons well in the past 2 months especially. And if you didn't have that, just a little aside, you can apply for an extension and your attorney can help you with that to put you in a safe zone. But of course, in these times, I would recommend the COVID clause. So the short answer to closing a sale in COVID would be, do not put off until tomorrow what you can do today. Time really is of the essence. I have my 3 pillars to a successful transaction. It's being prepared, proactive, and persistent. Wrap it up in some empathy and some understanding, and that's a particularly good recipe and approach for closing sales during COVID. So that's it for me, everyone. Hope the insight was helpful. Back to you, Denise.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for the positivity, another P. All right, we'll go right into Christian. Christian is going to give a quick update on the residential real estate market because we've had so many questions about if things are happening, what's going on, are prices coming down, going up, etc., etc. So Christian is going to give a quick update on what's happened since last year to now. Christian.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for your time. In looking at the market, I think there are many different segments to the market, but I think we'll look at the residential property market and sort of consider a couple of things, supply and demand, as well as what makes people make a decision to purchase. I think purchasing a property is always a bit of a balance of lifestyle and investment. And I think that's one of the things that's changed over time is how people apply that principle to their purchase. If we go back to 2019, prior to COVID, things were pretty all right. You know, people were buying, and it was pretty standard. We had looked at the market sort of at a previous 5 years, and it was fairly flat. Hotspot was around 2 million, 2.5 million. People were looking at townhouses and gated developments, communal living, just for ease and affordability. We started to see a bit of an uptick in the market, and then boom, COVID hit and we were locked down. So everything came to a halt. There was no longer any supply or demand, and everybody had to go and sit on their hands. So we sat and we watched, and what we found is within a couple of weeks, we realized that actually there was an uptick in people visiting our website. We went more on social media and we saw more response to that. So actually a demand was building, and even though we couldn't show property, there was definitely a bit of a surge. When we came out of lockdown, all of a sudden there was this pent-up demand, and people were a bit more motivated to make decisions. I think for a long time there was no real urgency, but people now realize if they like their house or if they don't like their house, if they like living with a roommate or they don't, if they want to be in a townhouse or they want that pool. So people were ready to make decisions on the buying side. And similarly with vendors, some vendors realized that their house was too big for them, or they were ready to move away and live with their family in the US. So they put their property on the market. So we had a really interesting time there where there was really good demand, and things were ticking over quite quickly. We started to see some other interesting trends. So we did see people moving away from townhouses and apartments to houses with land so that they can have that garden and they can run around a bit more, which I think a lot of people are grateful for right now that we're locked down again. I know people are running around their gardens and making laps of their house just to get a bit of exercise, and I'm sure they're very grateful that they made that decision. We also saw a huge uptick in staycation homes. So places we used to go for the long weekend, go down to Mayaro or Blanchie Shares, over to Tobago. We at Terra saw a 250% increase in staycation homes since lockdown last year. People were, sort of putting their money where their mouth was for a long time and investing. So I think that's one area where we saw people change their dynamic a bit from looking at property as purely as an investment, or as 70% investment, 30% lifestyle. Is the lifestyle side of it was becoming more important. People want to live happily and enjoy themselves, so they're committing to something a bit more long term. Price reductions, we saw prices coming down as vendors were getting more motivated. There are no huge drops or anything drastic, but we saw a 7 or 8% decreases in people that were motivated to sell. And that was seen by buyers, and buyers jumped in and took advantage of that opportunity. Some of the other bits we saw was that people were more focusing on being comfortable and less focusing on a return. So they really wanted something that they can work from. They can have an office in their house. People are looking for sort of larger properties as opposed to 1 beds or 2 beds, and settling in a location, or even moving out of Port of Spain, because you not necessarily have to be near the office anymore. So you can get more acreage in Couva and settle there. To close, I think coming out of this, we expect to see, again, pent-up demand. I think each of us in this chat can agree that in the last couple of weeks, we've seen an uptick. We've seen people asking more questions and inquiring about properties. And people they're at home, they're looking at their websites, their buyers are better prepared than ever, and there's a lot of information on the internet and on social media, and they're ready to make decisions. Banks are competitive. You can get really good mortgages from several banks, and it's not terribly expensive to borrow at the moment. So people are getting off the fence, and they're making decisions, and they're making lifestyle decisions. I think that's it for me for now. It's just a sort of a touch on what we're seeing. If I had any suggestions, I'd say as soon as we can, get out there and look at as many properties as safely as we can, because demand is growing and supply is not necessarily growing. So it's time to get on the market, get on the ladder. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. That kind of concludes our presentation. If there are any questions at all, please use our comment section and start typing in your question. We do have one question from Janelle Pran. Do real estate agents' fees vary depending on the value of the property? Does anybody want to tackle this? Hands up.
Josette, you go.
You go ahead.
Okay, do fees vary based on the value of the property? That's it, right?
Yeah.
No, I think she's asking the real estate agent's fees, if they vary depending on the value of the property. If we charge a property search, maybe.
Okay. So the industry standard, first of all, let me just back up a little bit. If you're a buyer and you're looking for a property, working with a real estate agent is basically free of charge. That's why we value our time so much, and we really ask that people respect that and don't waste our time. So in real estate in Trinidad, in our market, the vendor, the one selling the property, is the one who pays the commission. So basically the commission is between 3% and 5% of the achieved sale price. So that is the industry standard, but of course, sometimes there are situations which would call for a tinkering of that model. So industry standard 3 to 5%, and that's that. So expect fees to be in that range. And of course, if you're a vendor and there's a really difficult property for you to sell, it's probably being probated. You have to, you need an agent to to do some more research and call in other resources, then that's a one-off separate conversation that you want to have. But as a buyer, if you're working with an agent, they will fee directly to you. However, let's just say you're a foreign company or some special entity and you want to hire an agent to look specifically for you, then that would be sort of like a consultancy fee, which would be decided at the time of having that conversation. So as a buyer, regular buyer looking to buy commercial, residential, you're not paying any fee to the agent for their services. And yeah, so that's about that. We just ask that you, out of respect for our time and our resources, our intellectual property, just keep us posted on your search, on your, if anything changes, whether your pre-qualification amount goes up or down, whether some life event happens where you need to put the search on hold or speed it up a bit. Just communicate with us so that we can serve you best in the shortest space of time. And I don't know if anybody want to jump in on that, but that's my response to that question.
Fantastic. Anybody want to weigh in? Yes, no, maybe so. I see that Daryl Mohan said demand for property is growing. I don't know if that was a comment or a question, but yes, demand is growing and we're seeing that happen.
I would agree.
I would agree as well. Any questions, please use the comment section before we close this Q&A.
I'd like to ask a question maybe to those who are listening. Where
Sure.
would you like to buy a property? Where, as Daria suggested, you know, if you could have a second home, would it be Blanchard Shares? Would it be Mayaro? If you can ideally work from home and work anywhere. I've had a client recently, he was selling his house in Tobago. We had a viewing. He got over there to prepare the house for the viewing. He called me from the house. He said, "I'm really sorry, but cancel the viewing because I'm going to stay here and I'm going to work from Tobago." So, you know, it was a shame that we weren't able to do it, but you know, he made a lifestyle decision, and because he can now work from there. So where would you like to be?
I mean, while we're waiting for people to answer, we have Christy Ramnath with, I'm just curious, not that your question is not valid, Christian. Christy Ramnath says, I'm curious, I know you mentioned that sellers are reducing their prices. Do you think this trend will continue for the remainder of the year? Anybody want to weigh in?
That's a good question.
I'm happy to answer that if you don't mind, as I did a bit of the market update. In places where there's big supply and people need to sell or motivated to sell, prices may come down a bit, but I think that's good property in good locations is limited and difficult to find. And I think if you have a house that's well maintained and looks good in a good spot, you're going to find that you have a lot of people looking at it. So in that case, I don't think you need to reduce prices. I think sitting and waiting is the easy thing to do, but it's not the right thing to do.
Yeah. Can I jump in there as well?
Yes.
Sure. So I agree 100% with what Christian just said. And it reminds me of what Andrea had mentioned. Like, don't put off what you can do today. Like, don't put it off until tomorrow or some other time. And we're being totally honest with you guys. We have foreign clients who are waiting for those borders to open so they could come back and do their real estate transactions. So right now it is a buyer's market. As people get vaccinated, the COVID numbers come under control, borders reopen, businesses start back, operating like normal, there would not be such negative pressures on the market. So I would say play for what you see, as they say. If you find a property that's good value, it meets all your criteria, like what Darius had recommended or had asked you to think about, go ahead and buy it. Like, it's just go now. You don't have a crystal ball, but it is a buyer's market right now. Mm-hmm. So don't, if you don't really have to. You have financing in place. Go ahead, take that leap.
Make it happen. Okay, so Janelle Pran has another question. Do you have any tips on finding property that is suitable for flipping? Example, do banks publish these foreclosures? Is there some sort of listing that can be accessed? Talking to you, ex-bankers.
Yeah, let me jump in and take this one here. That's a great question, Jenna. Thank you for that. The first thing that we would say is that we have a huge database of properties right now that you might be able to flip if that's your intention, if that's what you want to do. But you must think about the timeline of when you would want to do that. So if you send us your information, we can put you on a listing or mailing list based on your criteria, and it will automatically push properties out to you on a regular basis, and we'll keep you updated. With regards to the banks repossess properties. Actually, yes, they are published on the newspapers, and it's usually on a bid process though. They're not going to publish the prices. They publish the properties. Some of these properties we represent as agents ourselves. So we do have some of these listed that we can take you to and give you a good indication of what we think it might be worth or what a fair price it might be. So keep your eyes open, but I would encourage everyone that's on the call, if you have real interest in property, contact one of us. So go to the Terra website, reach out to us directly, and we'll put you on a mailing list based on your criteria.
Great, thank you, Darius. We have Alicia Mendoza. I don't know if you all know that name. Is it true that you're allowed to build a home on agricultural land?
You can.
Alicia, come out to test us today.
I can't remember what the requirements are, but you can build on the agricultural land and then reclassify it later on. You can apply to change it over to residential. But details of that, I will have to get back to you on that. But yes, you can.
I believe it's called a homestead. So you can build a homestead property. That means
One dwelling.
On agricultural land, and the whole premise is that you're going to live on the land and plant the land. So not an apartment building, not a grocery store, one residence, one continuous roof, homestead on agricultural land. So yeah, you can.
Fantastic. I hope that answers Alicia's question. Rodney Patterson says, what areas do you see as up and coming areas where you can get the best value? I mean, I have my own opinion.
Let's hear it.
We had a blog. Okay, I will take a stab at it. We had a blog article about, I think it was in the Red Book a couple of years ago. And we said, up and coming areas where you could get the best value, obviously outside of Port of Spain. And this is pre-COVID. We spoke about Canupia, I believe Dabadie, Aranguez, El Socorro area. Feel free to stop me. I can talk all day.
They've had a lot more development in Sandy Grande too.
Yeah. Sandy Grande, exactly.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, there's a lot of there's a request for commercial space in Grande as well. Mm-hmm. If you look at Sandy Grande, they have the big Extra Foods that has just gone there, and they're building like a little city center. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that to answer that question from Rodney, that the central areas seem to have a high demand. I think because of location, but I also think because of value for money, what you get in the areas that are out of Port of Spain.
Correct.
And like Christian said, right now, you can think of areas that you probably would not have thought of before, simply because there are a lot of companies that are indefinitely working from home now. They've moved away from that model of coming to the office. I mean, while I know that the office will always exist, and I hope that, soon all our retail stores and stuff will open again, but indefinitely, they've been functioning fine. And so persons can move away from their head office. Rural areas.
I was chatting with a developer, this was, oh my gosh, 2 months ago. So that question is really, really good, because he said deep south is where you should be looking. So people talk about, the doubles in Davie or Pinal. I mean, the doubles. But while you're down there eating the doubles, please look at getting some property. Because, as they expand the network of the highway, that is where development will follow. So if you have some land, I'm sure it don't look desirable thinking about deep south, but you have some money, snatch that up and sit on it and, place your bet.
So let me jump in here now, right? And value does not only mean price. Value is based on your dream and your amenities. For instance, if you have to drive 3 hours in traffic to get to work each and every day, You may want to pay a little bit more to live in an area that's closer to your office. So value is what does it mean to you? What are you willing to give up?
Yeah.
It's not only about price. And I want you guys, that's why we started this conversation. We said, let's start with your dream and think about these different things. So what is valuable to you is what is important. So you need to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the next thing I would say is, if Andrew, our valuations manager, was on the call, he would probably say something like, well, what do you mean best value? Exactly. Because, when you say value, for a valuer, that means many different things. There's many different factors. But, from our perspective, that's our answer. Keep the questions coming. Canupia and San Grande are growing and in high demand at the moment. We are seeing many clients calling for properties in these areas. Thank you, Daryl. Any more questions? Leah Marie Giselle says, I think once you start to develop areas commercially, the value would increase residentially because of proximity.
Correct, because it'll open up the jobs, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have some property people on this call, man.
Denise, while we wait for a question, I wanted to get Darius's take on this, right? There was a young lady who asked a really good question about the foreclosures. And I think a lot of us, especially due to cable TV and international news, we think that because a property is being foreclosed by a financial institution, you can get the property for like next to nothing. And it's a huge misconception. So even though, and Darius, please correct me if I'm wrong, from your experience, you'd be able to shed some light on this. But as far as I'm aware, and I've had 2 foreclosed property for sale recently, the bank will try to get the highest and best price. They will try to get it as close to market value as possible. And actually, one of my clients lost out on a foreclosed property through another agent because the winning bid was actually more than the valuation. So Darius, what do you think about that? You would say I'm right on that, or?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. At the end of the day, all finance institutions must act in the best interest of their client, whether or not they mortgage their property. So they're going to try to get the best on the sale for that client. They're going to try. They mightn't always take the highest bid because you want to also make sure that a willing buyer will be able to close on the transaction. But they're bound by law to act in the best interest of their client. So they will definitely try to get the best price for that property. And if the property is an area of high demand, people are going to bid on the property and they're going to be very competitive with it. So it's not a situation where you think that because of repo property, you could lowball the price. That's actually the best interest of the client. And most of the time, a client may have borrowed 90% of the value at that time, So just be mindful of that.
Okay, we have another question and from Leah Marie Giselle. How are properties valued? I've seen a lot of postings where the prices are crazy high and it's flood-prone / high crime areas. Who does the valuation? That is a very good question that I will hand off to any one of these agents.
How are properties valued?
I don't. Yeah, let's let somebody else take it, not me.
Let's just start. First of all, the valuations is based on history, right? Not necessarily current. They look at the current market and see what's happening. They don't look at the future. They look behind them and what properties are sold in that area, at what price and all that. And then, of course, there's so many different variables because a property of similar could be on one end of the street and be valued this, but then on this end of the street, maybe it's because it's closer to a main road, maybe because the finishes are different, and it gets valued differently. As for the, said what, any flood-prone or high crime areas? Well, I'm not sure. I can't answer for that because isn't that the person? Is it that's the value, or is that the price that the owner called?
Exactly.
I think that's the difference. Is a valuation and an official valuation should be the number at which the property changes hands, so true market value. Whereas a lot of what you'd see on websites are asking prices, and that's more of a balancing act between a vendor and an agent, and not necessarily a value. It's probably a price you're looking at, whereas value may maybe what someone would agree to pay for it would be less than that.
Yeah.
Agreed. Maybe the next live we'll have is a valuation call.
Yeah, I think that's quite a
We
misconception.
might fall asleep.
Yeah. Oh Lord, Rodney Patterson. I'm not gonna comment. Rodney Patterson said price and value are not the same. That is absolutely true. Just as Christian said, what you see advertised a lot of times is the asking price, what the vendor has put forward as the asking price. We try to advise as much as possible. And the value may be much less, and sometimes it may be a little bit more. Leah Marie Giselle, is it that the owner must do a valuation, or is it that it's optional?
Now, in order to sell your property, you don't want to have your property sitting down on the market too long. So if you want to try and price it as close, okay, so if you get a valuation and you ask as close to valuation, probably your property will probably sell faster, right? So it's not an absolute must, but we would recommend it, so we could have the,
And as your agent, what we do in addition to what Sasha said, as your agent, we would get information on what houses or property may have sold for in that area, and we can present you with that information, so that would inform you on pricing. So the vendor does not have to do a valuation. It is recommended if the data out there is just really not there for us to guide you on pricing, but you don't have to.
Anybody else want to weigh in before we go into another question?
Shoot.
Sure. All right, Georgia Cicheron. What factors does an agent consider when advising an owner on the listing price of their property if they haven't had an official valuation?
Well, again, it goes back to what even Josette just said.
Yeah, she just said what Josette answered.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
I read your mind, Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, we try to get as much data as we can from the market.
Correct.
As your age, that's what we do. We will look at the area, we will advise you. But again, at the end of the day, it is like Christian said, a balance between our advice and what the vendor wants, and putting that and there is a buffer in most, I wouldn't say in all prices, and culturally we are buyers that like to negotiate. Culturally, that's who we are. So we do factor that in as well when pricing. Yeah, so it's a combination of all a whole like kalaloo or a pilau.
Pilau.
Richard Trestrail. I don't know if you all know this name, Richard Trestrail.
Never heard of him.
Never.
He says, although vendors may put a high price on his property, if a purchaser is using a financial institution, they will have to get a valuation. So the vendor will be hamstrung by the valuation.
Yeah, of course, because the banks are only lending you up to valuation price. So you have to have that difference in cash. I mean, you can pay over price, but the bank is not going to lend it to you.
Yeah. What happens in the case where the valuation comes in below the agreed sale price? From Alicia Mendoza.
Wow.
So that just happened to me on a piece of land in the south part of Trinidad. So basically, because we were aware that we had I had a candid conversation with the vendor, and I told them, hey, based on what else is on the market, I believe this is overpriced. But he wanted to stick to his price. Really wonderful gentleman, but it is what it is, right? Wanted to stick to his price. And a valuation was done. It came in significantly lower. And at that point in time, the valuation was done before the signing of the sale agreement. Because the buyer and myself, we had to consider that the value may be totally off. So the buyer opted to do the valuation before signing the sale agreement. The vendor was okay with that. So we got that 10-day grace period to wait for the valuation to come back. And then at that point in time, we renegotiated and everybody was happy. My buyer actually ended up paying a little more because they decided that that was fine. In their mind, that was the figure they were willing to pay. So they paid a little more than valuation. Vendor was happy, and we're moving forward. So if you are seriously in doubt as a buyer, you're concerned about the agreed price and what evaluation will come in at, you can ask for the valuation, to do the valuation before you sign the sale agreement. But please understand, a vendor is not obligated to sell you their property at all, and the vendor is not obligated to sell you at the valuation price. So,
indeed. I think another avenue also, sorry,
sure.
Denise, I think another avenue, like if you do a valuation and it comes in really out of whack, like, you know, properties in the area have sold for, I don't know, 2.2, and then the person does a valuation and it comes in 1.8 or 1.7. I think that you can challenge or ask for the valuation to be redone or reconsidered based on that information. If the agent is able to provide information, well, you know, comps that are close by, maybe that can be redone. I'm just asking.
So
that was a question, yeah?
Well, yes and no. So I know that has happened before, and I'm probably asking for my colleagues on this panel to say, yeah, they've also experienced that. Maybe even Alicia Mendoza, who wrote the question, could weigh in on that. Alicia.
So guys, I just noticed there's another evaluation topic seems to be very popular here. I've seen a question from Georgia Citron coming in. Georgia, your question is, if you're a cash buyer, is it necessary to get a valuation? So let me take the other spin on it. Yes, it actually is, because the Board of Inland Revenue requires a valuation of your property to know the correct amount of stamp duty to charge you. So there are different types of valuation. There's open market valuation, that's how when a buyer and a seller meet an agreed price on what we think the property value might be. But there are also valuations if you're a cash buyer that the BIR would need to see. You may not need to go get it. If you don't, before you're able to purchase the property, the Board of Inland Revenue will send a team of their valuation team to go and assess the value of your property. So it may actually be in your best interest to approach a valuation firm. We have our arm as well, but there are a lot of qualified valuators outside there. I will give you that sort of opinion.
You know, I remember having a conversation with Andrew, and it would have been kind of awesome now that we have all these valuation questions. But I remember having a conversation with him, and maybe one of you all could confirm this to me. He said that you do the valuation and you have your purchase agreement, and pretty much the duty that you're paying is on the higher of the two.
Correct.
It's not, it's not on the valuation.
Correct.
So that's really interesting.
Yeah. I think we're going to organize another session with the valuations department. As a purchaser from